Imagine waking up one morning and feeling nothing, not sadness or frustration. Those would be something. Just emptiness. A profound exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch. The projects that once excited you now feel like impossible mountains. The people you care about feel distant, as if viewed through frosted glass. This isn't ordinary tiredness. This is burnout. And right now, it's silently consuming millions of lives across the modern world. You're not alone in this experience. We're living through what experts are calling a burnout epidemic, a widespread collapse of mental and physical energy that's affecting people across all professions, age groups, and backgrounds. A recent Gallup study found that 76% of workers experience burnout at least sometimes, with nearly 30% reporting they feel it very often or always. But here's what's truly remarkable. Despite our advanced understanding of psychology and unprecedented access to wellness resources, we seem less equipped than ever to handle the fundamental human experience of exhaustion. What if I told you that some of the most powerful solutions to our modern burnout crisis were discovered over 2,000 years ago? That philosophers who lived without electricity, smartphones, or social media understood something crucial about human energy and attention that we've forgotten. In this age of productivity hacks and optimization, we've overlooked ancient wisdom that directly addresses our modern exhaustion. Today on the Contemplative Path, we'll explore how ancient philosophical traditions, particularly Stoicism, offer profound insights into our current burnout epidemic. We'll uncover forgotten practices for sustainable energy management, examine how the Roman concept of otium challenges our addiction to busyness, and discover contemplative techniques that can restore not just your energy, but your sense of meaning and purpose. Whether you're currently experiencing burnout or simply feel the constant pressure of modern life draining your reserves, this exploration offers practical wisdom for reclaiming your vitality. Let's begin by understanding exactly what burnout is, not just as a modern psychological condition, but as a fundamental human experience that philosophers have recognized for millennia. The term burnout was first coined in the 1970s by psychologist Herbert Freudenberger, who used it to describe the emotional depletion and loss of motivation he observed in volunteer workers at a free clinic. Today, the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, characterized by three dimensions: feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. But burnout isn't merely a contemporary phenomenon. Throughout human history, people have experienced periods of profound exhaustion and detachment, what the ancient Greeks called acedia, and medieval monks termed the noonday demon. What's unique about our current situation is the scale and intensity. We're living in what sociologist Hartmut Rosa calls a society of acceleration, where the pace of life continues to increase exponentially. The 24/7 connectivity of digital technology has eroded boundaries between work and rest. The gig economy has normalized working multiple jobs, and social media has transformed leisure into a performance, turning even our downtime into another form of labor. Consider the historical trajectory. In 1930, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that by the early 21st century, advanced societies would have a 15-hour work week, with the primary challenge being how to use all our leisure time. Instead, we find ourselves working longer hours than ever, perpetually available through our devices, and experiencing unprecedented rates of stress-related illness. How did we arrive at this point of collective exhaustion? The Stoics, despite living nearly 2 millennia ago, would not be surprised by our current predicament. They recognized a fundamental human tendency that transcends historical eras: our propensity to exhaust ourselves in pursuit of externals, things beyond our control. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about this condition. In his essay on tranquility of mind, he described friends who were suffering from a kind of disgust with themselves, unable to settle into any activity or find satisfaction in their accomplishments, a description remarkably similar to what we now call burnout. What's particularly valuable about the Stoic perspective is its focus on the internal causes of exhaustion. While modern burnout research tends to emphasize external factors like workload and organizational culture, the Stoics identified how Our relationship to these external factors determines whether they deplete us. Epictetus, another prominent Stoic teacher, established what is now called the dichotomy of control, the principle that distinguishes between what is and isn't within our power. According to Epictetus, exhaustion often stems from expending energy trying to control the uncontrollable, while neglecting what is actually within our power. This insight has profound implications for our understanding of burnout. Consider how much mental and emotional energy you might spend worrying about a potential negative outcome at work, stressing about others' opinions, or attempting to meet impossible standards. The Stoics would argue that this misallocation of attention, not the external demands themselves, is what truly depletes us. Their solution isn't necessarily to change our circumstances, though that may sometimes be necessary, but to transform our relationship to them. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled Rome while managing the constant pressures of imperial leadership, developed specific practices to maintain his energy and perspective. In his personal journal, later published as Meditations, he repeatedly reminds himself to focus only on the present action, to avoid wasting energy on matters beyond his control, and to regularly return to first principles when feeling overwhelmed. Far from being abstract philosophy, these were practical techniques that helped him manage the immense responsibilities of ruling an empire without succumbing to exhaustion. One particularly relevant Stoic concept for our discussion of burnout is prohairesis, or the capacity for choice in how we direct our attention and judgment. The Stoics believed that while we cannot control external events, we maintain absolute sovereignty over our faculty of choice, deciding what to value, where to direct our attention, and how to interpret events. This faculty, they argued, is inexhaustible when properly understood. Unlike physical energy, which diminishes with exertion, our capacity for choice remains constant, providing an inner resource that cannot be depleted by external circumstances. In modern terms, we might translate this as psychological resilience, the ability to maintain perspective and purpose even under significant stress. Research in positive psychology confirms what the Stoics intuited. Resilience isn't primarily about avoiding challenges but about relating to them differently. Studies show that people with high psychological resilience experience the same external stressors as others, but process them in ways that preserve their energy and well-being. This brings us to a crucial Stoic practice for preventing burnout: the premeditation of adversity, or premeditatio malorum. Rather than maintaining constant optimism, the Stoics recommended regularly contemplating potential challenges and difficulties. This wasn't meant to induce anxiety, but quite the opposite. By mentally rehearsing how we might respond to challenges, we reduce the shock when they occur and conserve the emotional energy that would otherwise be spent in reaction. Imagine starting your workday by briefly considering what might go wrong: a conflict with a colleague, a project setback, technical difficulties. Rather than dreading these possibilities, you calmly acknowledge them and decide in advance how you'll respond. This practice builds psychological antibodies against stress, allowing you to engage with challenges from a place of preparedness rather than reactivity. Research on defensive pessimism confirms the effectiveness of this approach. People who realistically anticipate obstacles often handle them more effectively and with less emotional depletion. Beyond these specific Stoic practices, ancient philosophical traditions offer a more fundamental reorientation to the concept of rest and recovery. The Romans distinguished between negotium, business or occupation, and otium, leisure or ease. But otium wasn't merely the absence of activity, it was a positive state of engaged leisure, often involving contemplation, conversation, reading, or communing with nature. It was considered essential not just for recovery, but for the cultivation of wisdom and perspective. Seneca specifically warned against what he called strenuous idleness, the restless activity that characterizes much of our modern downtime as we scroll through social media, binge-watch shows, or engage in leisure activities that still demand our constant attention. True restoration, he argued, requires a different quality of engagement, one that allows the mind to expand rather than merely shift its focus from one demand to another. This Roman concept of otium stands in stark contrast to our modern hustle culture, where even rest is often approached as another task to optimize. We've lost the art of contemplative leisure, the spaciousness that allows not just for physical recovery, but for meaning-making and perspective-taking. True otium might involve walking in nature without tracking your steps, reading without a goal of finishing the book, or simply sitting in quiet reflection without any purpose beyond the experience itself. The contemporary mindfulness movement has rediscovered aspects of this ancient wisdom, demonstrating through research what philosophers intuited through observation, that contemplative practices significantly reduce burnout and restore psychological resources. Studies of mindfulness-based interventions consistently show reductions in emotional exhaustion and improvements in resilience across various professions, from healthcare workers to teachers to corporate employees. What makes these contemplative practices so effective against burnout? Research suggests several mechanisms. First, they activate the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode, countering the chronic stress response that characterizes burnout. Second, they enhance interoception, awareness of bodily sensations, helping us recognize signs of depletion before reaching crisis points. Third, they cultivate metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe our thoughts without being captured by them, creating space between stimulus and response. The Stoics practiced their own forms of contemplative attention, particularly through the exercise of prosoche, a state of continuous vigilant awareness. Unlike our modern tendency toward divided attention and multitasking, prosoche involves bringing full presence to each activity. Epictetus advised his students to approach each action with complete attention. When you are about to undertake some action, remind yourself what kind of action it is. This quality of undivided attention prevents the energy leakage that occurs when we're physically engaged in one task, while mentally preoccupied with others. Modern psychology confirms the wisdom of this approach. Research on attention restoration theory shows that directed attention, the kind required for focused work, is a finite resource that depletes with use. However, certain environments and activities can restore this capacity. Natural settings, in particular, have been shown to replenish attention resources more effectively than urban environments, supporting the intuitive connection many philosophical traditions made between natural spaces and mental restoration. This brings us to practical applications of this ancient wisdom for our modern lives. How can we integrate these philosophical insights to address our current burnout epidemic? I'll offer several practices derived from Stoic philosophy and other contemplative traditions that directly counter the mechanisms of burnout. First, the practice of attention boundaries, deliberately limiting when and how you engage with technology and information streams. The Stoics emphasize the importance of protecting your faculty of choice by being selective about what you allow to occupy your attention. In our hyper-connected world, this might mean creating tech-free zones or times in your home, practicing regular digital sabbaticals, or simply turning off notifications for all but the most essential communications. Second, the practice of role clarification, regularly reflecting on your core responsibilities and values. The Stoics recommended frequent reflection on one's roles and duties as a way of maintaining perspective. When feeling overwhelmed, ask yourself, what is actually required of me in this role? What is essential versus optional? This practice helps prevent the scope creep that often contributes to burnout, where we gradually take on more responsibilities without conscious evaluation. Third, the practice of energy auditing, identifying activities that deplete and restore your vitality. Pay attention to how different tasks, environments, and people affect your energy levels. The Stoics would encourage you to be strategic about how you allocate your limited resources, prioritizing activities aligned with your values and limiting exposure to unnecessary drains. This isn't selfish, it's stewardship of the energy you need to fulfill your responsibilities effectively. Fourth, the practice of contemplative leisure, engaging in true otium regularly. Schedule time for activities that expand rather than contract your sense of self and possibility. This might be time in nature, creative expression without judgment, philosophical conversation with friends, or simply sitting in quiet reflection. The key is that these activities aren't goal-directed but experience-oriented, allowing for the emergence of new insights and perspectives. Finally, the practice of philosophical journaling, regularly examining your judgments and reactions. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, used journaling as a tool for maintaining perspective amidst challenges. Set aside time each day to reflect on situations that triggered stress or depletion, examining the judgments that intensified your response. Ask yourself, what opinion or expectation contributed to my exhaustion here? What perspective might preserve my energy? These practices aren't quick fixes or productivity hacks. They represent a fundamental reorientation to how we manage our energy and attention, a philosophy of sustainable human functioning rather than a set of techniques. The ancient wisdom traditions recognized what we're rediscovering through burnout research, that human beings aren't machines designed for constant output, but complex living systems that require cycles of engagement and recovery. What's particularly powerful about this philosophical approach to burnout is that it addresses not just the symptoms, but the underlying condition of modern life. Burnout isn't merely about working too much, it's about a loss of meaning and agency, a disconnection from what makes work worthwhile. By reclaiming our faculty of choice and realigning our attention with our values, we restore not just energy, but purpose. As we conclude this exploration, I invite you to consider which aspect of this ancient wisdom might most directly address your current relationship with energy and exhaustion. Perhaps it's the Stoic practice of focusing only on what you can control. Maybe it's the concept of otium and the need for true contemplative leisure. Or it could be the attention boundaries that protect your most precious resource, your capacity for choice and presence. Whatever resonates most strongly, I encourage you to experiment with implementing it this week, not as another task on your to-do list, but as an invitation to a different way of relating to energy, work, and rest. The philosophers who developed these practices lived in worlds vastly different from our own, yet they recognized patterns of human struggle that transcend time and technology. Their wisdom offers not just relief from our current burnout epidemic, but a path toward sustainable flourishing in our complex modern lives. If you found value in this exploration, please consider subscribing to the Contemplative Path for more content bridging ancient wisdom with contemporary challenges. In our next video, we'll explore digital minimalism through a Stoic lens, examining how philosophy can help us reclaim our attention in an age of distraction. Thank you for your presence and attention, the most valuable currency in our accelerated age. Until next time, may you find wisdom in stillness and strength in rest.